I wanted to come back to Sister Sakina and talk about the Black Muslim woman's experience in the UK in terms of what you possibly, because I'm aware that you're not a self-appointed spokesperson or you can't speak on everybody's experience, but just sort of this, I guess there's dynamics that you would be aware of, narratives that you'd be aware of that you could possibly share in terms of maybe like historically, and historically doesn't mean 25 years ago, it could even mean 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but kind of from a historical perspective, what would you say has been the story or the common themes about Black Muslim sisters in the UK?
Yeah, what I want to say quickly just before I go into that is actually, as Brother Momodou was talking, it made me think that maybe a preferable concept as opposed to like the Black Muslim community might be the Black Muslim experience, because I think that kind of shifts it. Like what we go through is the same, you know. I mean, Momodou, he's Gambian, he could easily be Jamaican, like it doesn't matter, because when he's out on the street, the experience of him is the same, but when he goes home, there's a completely different framework. And I think that was what I was trying to lean to before about the differences. You know, I might look, most people think I'm from East Africa, but my framework and the framework of someone from Somalia, for example, or Eritrea is completely different. And I think that was really what my kind of point was, is that the experience, trying to clump it, or like you said, like almost, it's like trying to pour an ocean into a teacup, basically, by trying to put the Black community into one. But the Black experience or the Black Muslim experience, we can all share in that conversation, no matter your complexion or what have you, that we all know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. I guess I would say regarding the Black Muslim female experience, it's interesting. I remember someone said to me, and it was probably one of the funniest things anyone's ever said to me. She said, I feel very sorry for you. She said, because you're Black, you're Muslim, and you're a woman. It was a white woman who said this. And she had the purest of intentions, but for her, she was thinking, wow, the weight of all of those experiences. I don't even know how you are able to even bear that. You know what I mean? And I just thought it was funny, because to me, I see myself as the most magical entity on earth. Like for me, there's nothing more beautiful than a Black woman. There's nothing more beautiful than a woman who follows the way of Allah. And there's just nothing more beautiful than Blackness, in my opinion. So when she said that, it was almost like, Rare, that's how you see me. That's not how I see me. Like I see myself as like a Black unicorn, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think there's something though in when people have low expectation for you, that it gives you a certain sense of freedom. And I kind of like that no one's watching me. I think it's a little bit like how I feel about, in some ways, the kind of way in which the Muslim community doesn't really pay much attention to the Islamic experience in West Africa. Part of me kind of likes that. Like, don't worry about us. Like, we're good over here. Look at your own stuff. Like, we got our own traditions that are being preserved in such a beautiful way. It almost feels like a pearl in an oyster to me. So for me as a Black Muslim woman, how I identify myself is with absolute, I think it's the best. I don't think there's anything more beautiful. However, within a wider framework, obviously people see us as, you know, some like outside of the Muslim community, there is this whole idea that like we must be uneducated, that we must be oppressed, that we are from the lower rungs of society. I remember once I was at an event and someone was talking about this very elite event she had been to, and she was like almost feeling sorry for me. She kind of was like, oh, I'm really sorry, you know, this isn't somewhere you've probably ever been to. And I was thinking, bruv, like, I could be the daughter of the Emir of Kano. Like, you don't even know me. Like, I could be the Queen of Zanzibar, you know, like you have no idea, but you just assumed because I'm a Black woman with a headscarf on that I must be from a particular trajectory in life. I must be in a particular like location. Small things like when I got married, I remember I went to sign up at the local GP, and the woman behind the receptionist was like, spoke very slowly, "Can you speak English?" And I'm like, I just got an honors degree in English literature, you know, like, so all these assumptions, I think, that come from what it means to look like this. An assumption that you come from me, an assumption that I come from a refugee background, for example. So there are many things that that the experience comes with, as well as, I think, you know, you have talking about marriage. Momodou spoke about marriage, and what he said is exactly my feelings. Like, anytime there's a conversation about race, you always hear, particularly a lot of brothers, like, if I wanted to marry your daughter, you know, oh, Pakistani uncle, you would say no. You know what I'm saying? And my thing is like, why is that always brought up? You know, why is it the black men, whenever it's black Muslim men, whenever they're talking about this problem, they always refer to wanting to marry the local imam's wife? And so what I definitely
his daughter or his wife?
Sorry, his wife. I mean, his daughter.
Because that would be a problem. That would be a problem.
But this idea actually, and so I see it with a lot of the women of my friends and the women of my community, black women, that they do struggle to get married. You know what I mean? They do struggle to get married. And I see a lot of our sisters, you know, a lot of sisters I know, maybe they might marry African-American men, and if people that will marry, you know, continental African men, for example. So, you know, that's definitely an issue. And it's not just an issue of, you know, other men or men from other cultures not wanting to marry us, but also the issue that our own men don't necessarily want to.
And that's something pretty deep that I hope we get time to come back to and look at in a bit more detail, because that is something that's a theme that keeps coming up in different circles that I'm aware of.
Absolutely. And I contemplate it sometimes, like I wonder what it is, you know what I mean? I wonder if we're looking at, like, for example, within the context of people that embrace Islam, like a Caribbean guy who embraces Islam, Caribbean woman, maybe in my mind, I'm trying to understand, I'm like, maybe the Caribbean brother might prefer someone from another Muslim background because maybe he wants his children to be raised within that framework. Like, I'm like trying to rationalize, is it that you want to marry someone who's maybe Somali or Moroccan, or, you know what I'm saying, from South Asia, because you want that framework for your offspring? Or is it potentially because maybe the woman represents a life that you've left behind, and maybe you're afraid that if you guys, you know, that it might be thin, like maybe she might go back. I don't know what it is. Or is it simply, which I think it is, it's because there is very low love of self, you know what I'm saying? And the ones who tend to suffer the most by way of that is the women, you know. I don't even need to talk about, but I'm sure we can all talk, you know, we could all just understand the kind of intersections of, you know, racism, feminism, you know, classism, gender, all of these things that exist within the Muslim women's experience. But I guess for myself, the women that I'm around are so empowered by Allah, you know what I'm saying? Are so empowered by the love of Rasulullah, that I don't necessarily see that we see ourselves as oppressed. There's oppressive systems, but I feel like the women that I'm around, that's how it is. And then to add, but I'm not going to go into it, for myself and the community that I'm connected to, we're also now connected to a very deep, strong tradition of female West African shuyukh and scholarship, which has given us a whole other level of confidence of, like, I noticed that people from Pakistani backgrounds or Arab backgrounds, they too are running to understand, like, what is this tradition of female scholarship that exists in West Africa? Innately Islamic, no need to be Muslim feminist, no need for these other, like, additional terms alongside our Islamic femininity. So that's a whole other thing that we are drawing from as well, you know what I mean? So yeah, I guess that's my kind of feeling.
My response to some of what you mentioned, or I can't help but thinking as a therapist, just thinking like clinically, like there is internal, you know, post-colonial, post-transatlantic slave trade. There is anti-blackness, not anti-blackness, but colorism within the Black community. I almost found it comical when recently Oprah interviewed Meghan Markle, and there was a conversation about, and I kind of respect Oprah as a good actress, generally speaking, but when Meghan Markle mentioned that somebody asked how dark the baby's gonna be, and she gasped, and Oprah gasped, I was like, that gasp was in poor taste. You're an African-American woman, man. I'm not throwing nobody under the bus, but let's be real. We even have those conversations amongst ourselves as Black people when the man is dark, very light-skinned and has soft hair, and the woman is very dark, or vice versa. But people say things like that. So how she was so astonished, I found that quite interesting. And to connect it to the issue of sometimes brothers not wanting to marry sisters from their own ethnicity, for want of a better term, I think it is possibly an aspect of it, because it can't speak to everybody's experience, but some of it is related to colorism. I guess we can't really get away from that. I mean, we spoke with Professor Danjuma last month, and he mentioned about when he was working in a particular mosque, and you know, brothers would approach him for marriage, and they would say they're looking, Caribbean brothers might be looking for a you know, they're looking for a Moroccan wife or Iraqi wife. What's going on? What's with that? I'm paraphrasing now, and be like, oh, you know, for Arabia, you know, it's Arabic, the Arabic. And they say, oh no, we got some, you know, some good women from Sudan here that's not married and stuff like that. Very nice, dark-skinned women, and they would freeze. But you're saying he didn't really have the women, but he just wanted to like kind of like test the psyche out. And so clearly there's something else going on apart from Arabic. But as I said, only because of time, I'm going to move on to Brother Mamadou to maybe speak about your perspective as a man, but being in the Muslim community and having a perception or a view of how you see the sisters historically. Yeah. And I said not ancient history, but any history that's relevant to your story.
No, it's very interesting because so I'm 27. I'm going out on a limb. Bilal, you look very young, but I'm gonna say I think I'm the youngest on the panel today.
I'll give you that one.
So I mean, right now, what we see right now is if you're on social media, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, there is like my generation. There is beef right now between Black women and Black men. Yeah, Black women are just tearing Black men, and you know, as I say, they're tearing their singlets, and you know, many times it's quite justified. Yeah, and likewise, Black men are responding in certain ways as well. But then, I just find the conversations to be kind of like just they're not really progressing anything. It's like, okay, yes, but this is a problem. I think it's very important when Ina said as well that she feels she doesn't see herself as oppressed. Because I find that when you begin to make like your trauma, your politics, and again, there is a place for healing. There's a place for healing. There's a place for speaking about like your problems amongst people in a safe space, but that shouldn't be the guiding principle. Because things like colorism, featureism, texturism are what? They're eugenics. That's a form of eugenics. It's another iteration of anti-white supremacy. And when I hear Black women say, Black men are our oppressors, I don't believe that's the case. I think the oppressor is the oppressive systems. I don't think Black men have the political power to be the oppressor. That's not saying they can't act oppressive, but they're not the oppressor. I think it's very important that we frame the discussion. That's what I'm trying to do constantly. Okay, I hear what people are saying, of course, but let's direct that energy to somewhere more useful. So what I was doing right now, and I recommend everyone do this, just read Bell Hooks. So Bell Hooks speaks about, in We Real Cool, Black Men and Masculinity, she speaks about what goes into socialization of Black men. Because why is it, because the question must remain, if so many Black women have a negative experience of Black men, and this is before, forget it being Muslim, so many Black women have an experience of a Black man called me a name, a Black man insulted the way I look, a Black man did this, and these are true experiences. The question then must be asked, what goes into socialization of Black men to make them act this way? And no one's asking that question. So again, unless we tackle that question, we're going to keep reproducing white supremacy. We're going to keep producing eugenics and these race-centrist arguments. So as for the community now, as a marriage as well, I hate the topic of marriage, but I kind of feel like
it's a cringe-worthy topic in some respects. The way I heard you mention it earlier, like why do people just jump from can I marry your daughter? Like it is slightly cringe-worthy, but there is still something that's relevant in the sense it is highlighting some sort of prejudice.
Yeah, from the Black men, 100%. And I've seen it. I've seen like Black men particularly who I know, they will like bend over backwards to marry into a non-Black family. And whilst they're being insulted, literally, they're being, and again, that's what Sukina says, it comes from a place of not loving yourself. And I feel like what kind of, and to be fair, maybe even myself, I might have fallen victim to that when I was younger, because I remember my socialization growing up was I watched Christina Milian, Aaliyah, Beyonce, Kelis. These are the pinnacles of beauty and if you're lucky, you might have got a Gabrielle Union every now and again. So these are the pinnacles of beauty for me growing up. So naturally, when I was younger, going into spaces of trying to think of like, you know, work out sexuality, things like this, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is what I find beautiful. And they say it's just a preference. No one is objectively beautiful. What you find beautiful is socialization. You've been socialized into believing what is beautiful. So and my turning point for me, if I'm honest, was Malcolm X, who taught you to hate yourself. That was like a turning point for me, because when he said, who taught you to hate the color of your skin, texture of your hair, the shape of your nose? Why did I associate? And I might not have been conscious of that, I never verbalized it, but deep down I know I found certain things, certain quote unquote African features to be unattractive. But again, we have to be honest with ourselves as Black men and hopefully go through that process of unlearning. And not for the fact of just to marry a black woman, but for the fact that first and foremost, you see yourself of worthy. You don't project unworthiness onto other black men who look like you. That's what, because that results in what? Why is it like you find black men on the road, young guys, teenagers, would rather like do a madness to other black boys, but wouldn't touch a white person? Because they deem the white person's life less than their own life. They deem white person's life more worthy than their own. So I think, yeah, my thing is that again, colorism, these things are so deep, but they go beyond just like marriage topics. It goes to beyond to like gang crime is involved in it. How you see yourself, how you then project onto your mothers, how you then end up reproducing white supremacy and eugenics. So I think that's why I'm just trying to have that conversation more. And within that conversation, we can have the one about marriage, of course, but let's not focus just be why are black men not marrying black women. The conversation should be what goes into socialization of black men to see themselves as less than.
No, absolutely. I have to agree with it 100%. I think that the phrase you mentioned about the gangs, it reminded me of a saying from a deceased PhD, Mohammed, that systematic automatic remote control, that people act out in a certain way because of like the socialization process. And there's a really interesting piece by Amos Wilson as well, Black on Black Violence and Self-Destruction in the Service of White Supremacy, Psychodynamics. Is a really, really, really powerful read, because it like talks about the systems. There's this behavior that we see, but there's these systems in place that keep them replicating, those behaviors being replicated generation after generation. And I think that's what we have to, I guess, try to disrupt. And even this conversation is part of trying to disrupt that matrix, trying to break the signal or put something else out there. We might not be able to get to all of the answers, but maybe we can raise enough talking points that people can see this, and it can get people reflecting a little bit more critically around these issues in a deeper way.